Welcome, guests, to Hotel Pacifico's Battle for BC, the third of our weekly episodes breaking down the federal race here in British Columbia. Today, we're going to drill down on the Eastern Fraser Valley, beyond Hope, the BC interior mainly, and the Yukon. And joining me today again is our good friend Richard Zussman from Global TV. Richard, welcome back.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Richard, I really like your shirt.
I like your shirt.
Yeah,
So,
well,
so
let's
there's
show
a
those shirts
theme,
there.
right?
Oh yeah,
There's
look
a
at that.
there's a there's a theme evolving here. So, you and I have a lot of BC themed clothing in our
That's right.
wardrobes,
We're very
and
fashionable.
yeah, but when you talk about these ridings, there's nothing quite like a Trail Smoke Eaters shirt, and that
That's
is a
right.
community in this province that punches above its weight when it comes to sports. And everyone in this province knows about the success on the ice for the Smoke Eaters. I want to throw a shout out to Jason Bay too, a great Major League ball player who came from Trail as well. It is an incredible place with an incredible logo more than anything else.
Yeah, a lot of great personalities came from Trail. We're going to talk about Trail later, including how they really kind of screwed up the electoral boundaries there. Um, and you've got your Masters hat on. It's Masters weekend. And in politics right now, it's kind of like moving day at the Masters this week in the federal election race. Like the things like this is the week for things to move. So we got lots to talk about. But anyways, let's get right at it with our first segment, Milking the Data. Milking the Data brought to you by BC Dairy. Local agriculture feeds BC. Let's keep it that way. Now, this week we have another Polera exclusive. Polera Strategic Insights have been providing daily national numbers to our sister pod, Cursive Politics. And today, Polera's Dan Arnold has benevolently provided us with a breakdown for British Columbia again. And drawn from their large national sample, the BC sample this week is 358, with a margin of error of about 5%. And what it shows this week is that the Conservatives are at 41% across BC, and that's up 3 points since last week when we looked at this last time. The Liberals are at 38, unchanged. The NDP had gone up last week to 20, and then now they've fallen back to 13, according to Polera. And that's kind of in line with the 338 numbers as well, in terms
Yeah.
of where the NDP are sitting. Greens at 4, and PPC are at 3, and both the Greens and PPC are a little bit behind where they stood in the 2021 election. So it's very much a two-way race still in British Columbia. The NDP have got their work cut out for them. One added little factoid here that Dan has provided is that he looked at how people vote provincially and how those provincial voter groups are looking to vote federally. So among BC Conservative John Rustad voters, surprise, surprise, 87% are voting federal Conservative, 9% Liberal, 1% NDP. Now, among BC NDP David Eby voters, this is interesting. The Liberals are winning the center left primary here. So among those Eby voters, 57% voting Liberal, 29% voting federal NDP, and 13% voting Conservative. So the federal NDP are really underperforming among
Yeah.
provincial NDPers.
Yeah, and that's the only recipe to success in this province is if the Liberals are going to have success, they have to take away from provincial NDP voters. There
Yeah.
is no provincial Liberal Party anymore. There's a new centrist party that launched this week. We'll see what their success is like in the future. But this is about trying to get those votes. And we know the vote efficiency for the NDP is terrible. I have some new data from Ipsos. So
Okay.
Ipsos provides data for Global News and Global BC, my employer. Smaller sample size. BC numbers are different than what you're seeing. Maybe a reflection of the sample size. It's hard with these breakdowns regionally. It has the Liberals at 41, the Conservatives at 34, the NDP at 10, and the Greens at 1%. Clearly, the Greens are undersampled here based on what we're seeing, but it shows some stability, higher Liberal numbers, lower Conservative numbers than what you have, but relatively close were what we're seeing in terms of the aggregators. It has the Conservatives obviously a little bit down there. Compare that to what Ipsos had a week ago with a similar polling size. They had similar numbers: Liberals at 42, Conservatives at 37, NDP at 7, Greens at 6. So
What's
my
your
sense
sample
is
size on this one?
So we've got 134 on this. I don't have the margin of error for you.
Yeah, but
141 is the sample
yeah,
size out of a
yeah.
thousand.
It's a pretty
Our
about
BC
9%.
voters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, they're both, I mean, both directionally show the two-way race and the NDP struggling to stay
yeah,
relevant. So there's your milking the data fix this week. The sometimes we get stuck in what happened last election and can't imagine how some seats could change, right?
yeah.
And if these numbers do hold, the votes have to flow somewhere.
Yes.
And you're going to see the conservatives and the liberals win seats in places they haven't won in a while. And for the conservatives, that's probably going to be north of the Malahat, and they'll pick up some extra seats in the interior. The liberals are going to win a lot more seats in the Lower Mainland and the South Island. So
Yeah.
if this holds, if it holds, asterisks,
Yeah.
asterisks.
Yeah, and that's what this next week is all about, right? We have a debate, which is going to be a pivotal moment here for these leaders to have an opportunity to square off against each other. Again, we've talked so much about Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney. You need to remember they've never been on a national election debate stage before. It is a different test. There are going to be a lot of eyeballs on this because of the magnitude of this election. And if there's going to be movement, the movement has to happen this week before the polls, the advanced polls open up next week. And the point you made about where the votes flow, I've been thinking a lot about this. I think more people, because of the movement with the NDP, are using vote aggregators like 338 and
Yeah.
others to assess what they're looking at here. And you're starting to see, as we get towards the end, advanced polls, this conversation about strategic voting amongst progressives. And this happens in every election,
Yeah.
federally and provincially. Where are you most efficient? And I see these very silly arguments out there about who is the safest candidate to vote for the progressives. And I'm just going to use an example. One of the ones I recently saw was about Port Moody Coquitlam. The Liberal candidate, Zoe Royer, is trying to make an argument that if you want to keep the Conservatives out, the safest vote is for her, the Liberal. A bunch of New Democrats piled on and said, no, 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 the safest vote is the New Democrat. Benita Zarrillo is the incumbent. Well, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for strategically, but incumbency matters far less than assessing the polls. And incumbency is about how you did 4 years ago, not about how you're going to do today. And we know incumbency has an advantage. They get their mailers, they're out in community, they do work. But I wouldn't just look at incumbency as the advantage point when we're looking at polling data that indicates that voters are largely abandoning the New Democrats in this province.
And I think incumbency is kind of an exceptional situation where exceptional incumbents can withstand a tide.
Sure.
And in the 90s, we saw that with Sven Robinson and Nelson Rees hanging on by their fingernails when the NDP got blown out in a couple elections. But many NDP in that circumstance, many NDP MPs lost, and we see that in provincial politics all the time. So, yeah, sometimes when the tide goes out, the tide goes out, and good people lose their seats.
From the rugged coastlines of Haida Gwaii to the mountain town of Sparwood to the border community of Langley, British Columbia is diverse, and so are BC's public safety challenges. Only the BC RCMP is equipped to handle it all. With roughly 7,000 members and 150 specialized services, like major crime units, air and marine services, and emergency response teams, the RCMP is trained and ready. Their integrated policing approach ensures seamless coordination locally, provincially, and federally, keeping us safe no matter the threat. But public safety requires real investment. This federal election, we need leaders who prioritize stable funding and resources for the RCMP. Will our candidates stand up for a safer Canada? Send a letter to party leaders and learn more by visiting whyweserve.ca/election 2025. Authorized by the National Police Federation, whyweserve.ca/election 2025, 587-600-0630.
So today we're going to look at the Eastern Fraser Valley, the ones we didn't cover already. So we're looking at beyond Metro Vancouver, the east, Abbotsford, Chilliwack end. Then we're going to cover the entire interior. We have a lot of geography to go through, and then we're going to tiptoe in north of 60 into the Yukon. Now, if we look at the BC portion of this territory that we're talking about today, just to give a flavor of it, this was a conservative-dominated map. Last election, the NDP had two seats in the, or actually in the area, we're looking at one seat. and the Conservatives had all the rest. The Liberals didn't win any in these seats that we talked about. Popular vote wise, Conservatives won like close to half of the vote. The NDP had about a quarter, and the Liberals had less than a fifth of the vote. So, very much a conservative map, and we'll see whether they're at threat of losing any seats here or whether they have an opportunity to pick up an extra one. So now, let's start with the Fraser Valley, the Brawl for It All, Abbotsford, South Langley. This is one where your point about poll aggregators. This is one where, like, the last election does not apply because we have a strong independent candidate, Mike T. Young, running against conservative 25-year-old Zussman Gill, who won the nomination for the Conservatives. It was 2,000 people went to that nomination meeting. He won with 1,100 votes. So he brought in a lot of support. But there were some other candidates who made it to the ballot, unlike Mike T. Young, and who were closely connected with active conservative workers in the riding, like Mike Murray, who worked for Ed Fast, the incumbent MP. And there's a lot of noses out of joint out there.
Yeah.
The Liberals are running former journalist Kevin Gillies, who actually used to work for me, and he's a realtor now. And I don't have the NDP candidate in front of me. My apologies. But it comes down to the Conservatives and Mike DeYoung, with the Liberals maybe lurking for people who are strictly voting on brand. But it's a tipping point type of thing. I think if enough people decide that Mike DeYoung has a chance of winning, he might make it all the way. It really depends on. It's one of these things where it hangs in the balance. Do you stick with your party brand even though you don't know the candidate or you may not have a positive feeling about the candidate, or do you say, screw it, we're going with the guy we know? And it's a hard thing to measure at this stage in the campaign.
Yeah, so I've got a lot of thoughts on this, and we may get to wander into your favorite topic, which is 1994 provincial by-elections. Mike DeYoung obviously won that one. You've known Mike a long time.
Yeah.
I've known Mike a long time. What's going on here is interesting, but you look back to October, to the provincial election, and I say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Because we had this sense in October that these independents, who are well known in their community, were going to shake up the ballot, and none of them did particularly well. They had significant names. They had been campaigning. In 5 cases, they were incumbents, and they were never close to winning. None of them had the name recognition that Mike DeYoung has. Mike is as known a political entity in Abbotsford as anyone, and he has been on the ballot there for a long, long time. And whether that resonates with people is going to be interesting. The other factor is, for a long time, he had the name Liberal beside his name. And I think political followers in Abbotsford know that Mike DeYoung is a BC Liberal, and that in this province, BC Liberals is the Free Enterprise Coalition with federal Conservatives and federal Liberals. And he largely represented a conservative community. They know that. But when you think about that on a ballot now, with an electorate that is less informed than what we've seen in the past, will that matter? And the other piece in all of this is the Hotel Pacifico bagman would have a hard time handling the baggage that Mike DeYoung carries. And we have seen some of his colleagues, like Christy Clark and Rich Coleman, struggle to break back into politics, in part because of some unsettled concerns about the later years of the BC Liberal legacy. We don't have to rehash that legacy, Mike, but there is something that's being carried there from that time period that makes it struggle. You better give the hotel bagman a significant tip for carrying around that baggage. So all of that being said, my sense is Mike DeYoung is polling well in community. People know him. They like him. They are frustrated. Zussman Gill has been nowhere. They have hidden him here. This is a 25-year-old with no experience, whose family is connected to the Central Party. He is hiding. So how does that factor in for voters? Because Mike DeYoung, for the people of Abbotsford South Langley, would be an excellent representative. He has proven that time over time again. But their independence, it's so hard to win. Jody Wilson-Raybould did it. think about the media attention Jody Wilson-Raybould
Yeah.
got when she won that seat.
Well, one few final notes on this writing before we move on. I mean, this is well, Mike's an Abbotsford guy. There's actually it's probably more Langley than Abbotsford in this routing. So Young's challenge is that he has to win the South Langley portion, which goes all the way to the Surrey border.
Right.
The other factor here, though, is how are conservative rank and file members and voters feeling about all this? And I'll be watching what Ed Fast does, the former MP. He actually was not on Poilievre's number one list. He actually supported Charest during the leadership. Will Ed Fast break off and vote and support DeYoung? That could be a major move. So more to come here. Really interesting race, and it seems to be between the Conservative and DeYoung.
I'm going to take a crack, Mike, before we go to show
Yeah.
respect for the NDP candidate. It's a tough one. Dharma Sena Yakandawela, I believe is how we're best going to pronounce for now. Let me know, Dharma
Okay.
Sena, if you're listening, if I've got anywhere close there.
Okay. Moving over, Mission Matsqui Abbotsford. This riding is shrunk a bit. It used to extend into the Fraser Canyon and upwards, but now it's kind of all within the Lower Mainland. It's part of Mission out to Harrison, and then it dips into a good part of Abbotsford. It's represented by Conservative MP Brad Viss. He's being challenged by Liberal Jeff Howe, who's a lawyer, and NDP are Jules Cote, who's a member of the National Farm Union, and Elizabeth May's husband, John Kidder, is running as a Green in this riding. Now, this riding did go Liberal in 2015 with Jetty Sidhu. Brad Viss has won it ever since. It looks to be fairly securely in the Conservative column, although I did have a chat with one of my Abbotsford contacts the other day, and he was suggesting that there might be some Liberal game out there.
Yeah, so this is one of those ones where if this liberal wave is so significant, like we saw in 2015, this could
Yeah,
switch.
yeah,
But I wouldn't expect it to. The conservatives need it, right? This is like
yeah.
if the liberals are starting in the conversation of 200 plus seats nationally, they're creeping into 20, 21, 22 provincially. You have the NDP shift, in essence, all of their votes over to the liberals. That's where you start seeing Brad Biss in potential trouble here. But the conservatives need him. He is
Yeah.
becoming a more significant voice for that caucus for British Columbia in Ottawa. He is part of this next phase of the conservative movement. And so I wouldn't think too much about the candidates here. It really is about what sort of ways are we seeing it. And like you described, we've seen it once before in 2015. The Liberals are polling way higher now than they were in 2015. So you add that math up, and this becomes one that the Liberals could win with all of the factors combined.
So
But
this might be the
again, the conservatives
23rd
need
or
it. Yeah,
23rd or 24th Liberal seat elected potentially if
yeah,
they
yeah.
get that high.
22. Yeah, yeah. It's right in
Yeah.
there. It would be record breaking, and it would be part of a national wave rather than anything that's being done on the ground in the
Yeah,
riding.
it would kind of be the emerging Abbotsford population that's, coming out, moving out from Vancouver, and they're bringing different values, that type of thing.
Yeah, like you,
Um,
you need to have all the votes. Like People's Party plus Conservative last time on these maps, it's 54%. So you have to take conservative votes away as liberals, and you have to take all the new Democratic votes, and that's a big pull.
right. Okay, Chilliwack Hope. This has been a Strahl stronghold since 1993. Chuck Strahl won it in 1993 as a Reform MP. He served for 18 years. His son took the seat over in 2011, has won it ever since, Mark Strahl. He plays a fairly senior role in the Conservative caucus as well. The Liberals are running Zishan Khan, and the NDP are running Terry Westerby, a local school trustee who's the first openly transgender man
Yeah.
elected to public office in BC. But it looks probably pretty secure for Mark Strahl.
Yeah, I think so. You take the Liberals plus NDP last time around on these maps, still nowhere close to the Conservatives. The People's Party picked up almost 8 points on this one based on last results to these maps. That vote is evaporating. So I think Mark Stroll's probably pretty safe here. And again, it's part of this conservative um, not wave. It's a conservative vote that exists in this community. It's been very strong. Yes, Terry Westerby did extremely well, and that was a big pushback against Barry Neufeld and his anti-Soji rhetoric. We've seen success here from the NDP provincially, but that turned in the last provincial. So yeah, I expect pretty safe for Mark Stroll here.
Okay, we're going to move in beyond hope now. Oh, here comes Snickers.
Hi, Snickers.
Get him over there. He's pretty frisky this morning. He really likes these interior ridings. I think he also likes the snacks that are in my desk drawer. Similkameen, South Okanagan, West Kootenay. Now, this is an NDP seat mainly right now.
Yeah.
MP Richard Canning's well known up in the region and quite a distinguished author. He is retiring, and this looks like a conservative slam dunk seat for this election. The riding hugs the border from Princeton all the way to Rosslyn and Warfield and includes Penticton. It's a bit weird that Rosslyn and Warfield are not in the same riding as Trail.
Yes.
So, the boundary makers, sometimes they just get a little too cute when they do these things. And there's other boundaries around the West Kootenay that they've splintered the West Kootenay into 3 ridings, and I don't like it. So I'm registering my concern right now. Now, the Conservatives are running. Now, why don't you take it from here? Because you were up at that rally in
Yeah, I
particular.
was.
You saw the candidates
Yeah, so
or
Helena
the Conservative.
Konatz. Yeah, Helena Konatz is the conservative candidate there, a former champion tennis player. Uh, was a pressure-packed event at a rally. Was not as poised the local candidate as I have seen, but there's obviously a lot of nerves involved there. But clearly, the Conservatives have prioritized this as a pickup, right? Pierre Poilievre came and spent a whole day in the riding, working his way from down south in a Soyuz up through Oliver into this rally in Penticton, which had more than 3,000 people there. So I expect they have this one now as solidly in their camp with no incumbents, with Dick Canning's out and Linda Sankey in. It makes this easier for the Conservatives. And, based on these maps, last time around, the NDP would have won by a point and a half, which is like such a tight margin. So I expect this to be a significant Conservative pickup, one of 4 or 5 potentially in this province that they take from the NDP. And it's a reflection, I think, of part what you said, movement of the boundaries, but part of also what we're seeing in terms of the type of voters that Pierre Poilievre has appealed to, combined with the NDP losing a lot of their support. And you can't forget that they have seen this total withdrawal of their vote. And so Gloria Morgan from the Liberal, based on what we're currently seeing, she could be the one that ends up finishing second in this riding, based on what we're seeing with the New Democrats province-wide.
Right, and she's a former RCMP officer, lawyer, and former chief of an Interior First Nation as well. So interesting background. Okay, moving into let's go to the Okanagan next. Okanagan Lake West, South Kelowna. This is basically a new riding. It's been squeezed in there. Dana Albus from the Conservatives is running there. It runs from Summerlin up through Peachland to West Kelowna, crosses over the Bill Bennett Bridge, turns right, and incorporates the mission.
Yeah.
The Kelowna mission area. He's being challenged by Liberal Juliette Sicot. I don't know if I got that right. And the NDP's Harpreet Battlehall. Looking pretty secure for the Conservatives.
Yeah. Yeah. And Dan Albus is, again, one of these, must have. He took a pretty prominent role at that rally and at the press conference. Pierre Poilievre handed the mic over to him at least once in the press conference. He introduced him at the rally. Dan Albus is an important part of that caucus for the Conservatives here in BC. And the expectation based on what we're looking at these ridings, again, it's important to note, this is last time, but you take the New Democrat plus Liberal vote, doesn't even get to where the Conservatives would have been at with these maps.
Okay, so the more interesting battle is in Kelowna.
Yes.
This is entirely I think it's entirely, no, actually not entirely within the city of Kelowna,
but
mainly the city of Kelowna.
Yes.
It does sneak down Highway 33 to Beaverdale.
Yeah.
Essentially, this race is a rematch between Conservative Tracy Gray, the incumbent, and Liberal Stephen Fuhrer, who won the seat in 2015 as a Liberal and lost it in 2019 to Gray. He took 2021 off and he's back for the rematch this time. The NDP are running Trevor McLeese, an independent video game developer. Now, when the Liberals won this seat in 2015, it was one of 2 seats in the interior, but it was really the only full seat in the interior that they won.
Yeah.
They did win that Mission Matsqui Fraser Canyon seat, but But this was a big news for the Liberals to win in the interior in a place they'd never won before in Kelowna. And it slipped through their fingers in 2019. But in the last provincial election, 2024, the NDP almost won a seat in Kelowna, which is this federal riding encompasses. So I wonder whether the Liberals are back in the game this time.
Yeah, I do too. And this is a really interesting urban center with conservative values that the Liberals have eyes on. And we haven't seen Mark Carney much in BC. We haven't seen him in that region. I'd wonder if in the last 2 weeks, whether this is a place that they squeeze in a trip to say, look, let's take a shot here. Strong local media. So it matters to have the leader there. You get attention when you show up. And then on top of that, his issues matter here. So I spent time there 2 summers ago during the devastating fires in West Kelowna.
Mm.
And yes, it impacted this community's Kelowna as well when the fire jumped over the lake. What is the conversation like there around climate change, how we prevent fire? There's a dialogue that's happening around which party could best help us in the future. We have a tourism sector that has been so dramatically impacted by
Mm.
fires and smoke. You have an agriculture sector that has been devastated by flash freezing that destroyed grapes and vineyards. How does that factor into the voter that's also thinking about the core
Yeah.
issues of affordability, cost of living, public safety? So it's a really interesting dynamic on issues, but also a shifting demographic in the way that they think in Kelowna. As yes, there's a huge seniors population that some would describe as more
Mhm.
conservative, but they're younger families there too. I'm really, really interested by the dynamics of this. And with the NDP vote, they got 21% of the vote last time on these maps. You start shifting that towards the Liberals, they got a little bit more than 26 points, and all of a sudden the 42 points the Conservatives got last time is now attainable. And you
Yeah.
have in Stephen Fuhr, sure, he's not the best known name, his victories were a decade ago, but he is a former MP, and that carries with it some weight.
So I'll be up there next weekend, and I will personally be counting sign locations. So
Good.
be aware of that.
Because as we know, more signs you have,
I will be
the
broadcasting
higher
from Kelowna.
predictability of winning. Oh, this is going to be great.
Vernon Lake Country, Monashee. Again, this is with the ridings getting smushed around the Okanagan. This is a totally new configuration. So the Vernon
Yeah.
part is taken from the old shoe swap riding. Then you drive through Lumbee, cross the lake at Needles Ferry, and then you go all the way down to almost to Castlegar. And they've actually separated Cristova from Castlegar, and they've split the Doukhobor population there in these boundaries. How could they do that?
The pivotal Doukhobor
Uh,
population.
but- So
As
want
goes
my
the
Doukhobor
Doukhobors, goes the
friends know
province.
want my Doukhobor friends know to know that I'm thinking of them. Um, Anyways, we've got conservative Scott Anderson, a former Vernon councillor. I think he's a former councillor, but he's also former leader of the BC Conservative Party, actually.
Yes, yes, yes.
And he's being challenged by Anna Warwick Sears, who's a PhD in water management, who led the Okanagan Basin Water Board. But more interestingly, to me, anyways, she ran as a BC NDP candidate in the 2024 election in Lake Country.
Yeah, she
So,
did.
and the NDP are running Leah Main, who's a Silverton town councillor. Now, again, this is should be a conservative, um, is pretty secure seat, but Vernon does have an NDP MLA,
They do.
mainly because of a vote split, and the West
Well,
Kootenay portion of the riding typically marches to the beat of its own drummer. So, you know, if we see any big surprises on election night, this could be one. But if I'm conservatives, you got to lock this one down.
yeah, for sure. And Harwinder Sandhu, the NDP MLA, has now won it twice. So there are progressive voters there where they go likely is going to be liberal based on the polls. But like you said, this has to be conservative. And if we see this dramatic liberal wave where voters are saying the only thing that matters to me is stability, and I believe Mark Carney provides this, then this is a riding that could go Liberal. But again, it's the same sort of category as the Brad Viz's riding, 23rd, 24th, 25th Liberal seat. And now we're
Yeah.
talking
It's a
like
dam burst. Yeah.
historic numbers. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Columbia Kootenai Southern Rockies. So this is most of the Kootenays. Um, it's part of the West Kootenay and a lot of the East Kootenay, or all the East Kootenay.
Yep.
Fairly secure conservative seat. Rob Morrison's held it since 2019. For the Conservatives, the riding includes Nelson, Cranbrook, the Elk Valley, and the Columbia Valley. The NDP are running Callie Linz, Executive Director of the West Kootenay Arts Council. The Liberals are running Reggie Goldsbury, who served on the board of College of the Rockies and once operated the Duck and Dock restaurant in Balfour. Don't know if you've ever been there, Richard. I have not, but I
No,
did
I've
see
never been
that in his
there.
bio. I saw that in his
Yeah,
bio, and
good.
I like the name of the restaurant.
Yeah, good.
Uh,
You need to go.
but
And this is where trail is. Only real
yes,
note, like the important note on this riding, the NDP won it in 2015. So this is not one of these conservatives
yeah,
have won it forever seats. So there is a potential here, but the Liberals have never done particularly well here.
yeah,
Like even at the high watermark in 15, the Liberals were at 19 and a half. NDP were 37.2 and the Conservatives were at almost 37. So it was one of the closest ridings in the entire country when the New Democrats took it from the Conservatives. But based on what we're seeing currently, it's hard to believe Rob Morrison's going to lose. But it is important to note that unlike some of the other ridings we spoke about, this one has gone away from the Conservatives in the past.
right. Okay, so now we get up to Kamloops, Thompson, Nicola, and Kamloops, Shuswap, Central Rockies. So Kamloops has been split into two seats. That's different this time. So let's start with that second one, Kamloops, Shuswap, Central Rockies. So they've taken Kamloops, taken part of Kamloops, put it in with Salmon Arm, and goes as far out as Golden.
Yeah.
And the Conservative MP, Mel Arnold, is taking on that seat. I also want to add that the seat also incorporates Kingfisher. For those loyal Hotel Pacifico listeners, you will know the Kingfisher controversy that emerged last year. But I got out the maps and actually carefully looked at where Kingfisher stood. And Mabel Lake is actually split into two ridings, so it's very tricky to figure out. Anyways,
Well, you
such is my
figured it
attention
out.
to detail. I figured it out, and thank you, JF, for helping me on this. Anyways, this should be a Mel Arnold win.
Yeah.
And the other riding, Kamloops, Thompson, Nicola, takes, I think, and that goes right down to the middle of downtown Kamloops, the boundary of this riding.
Yeah.
So the west side of Kamloops is put in with Ashcroft, Cache Creek, down to my beloved Lytton, and out to
Yep.
Lillooet.
Yep. Merritt.
So yes, and Merritt. And that is Frank Caputo, the incumbent Conservative MP, is running for his second term. He's being challenged by Liberal Ian Curry, who ran for the Green Party twice. And this is an interesting one. He was an opponent of the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Right.
So I haven't talked to anyone in Kamloops lately, but I'm just surprised that a Trans Mountain opponent would be the standard bearer there, because
Yeah.
my impression is that Trans Mountain Pipeline is actually popular in Kamloops.
Yeah, and, the reliant upon it for the building of it, that it mattered to the community. So I have a hard time believing Frank Caputo's in any danger here. Kamloops is safer for the Conservatives than Kelowna if we're talking about urban centers outside of Victoria and Metro Vancouver. And I think Frank Caputo is in that category of Dan Albus and Brad Viz, who are incumbents, who are very important for the Conservative caucus in British Columbia. And Caputo is omnipresent in Kamloops, local media, CHNL, CFJC, CJFC. I'm going to screw up the
Yeah.
letters. I'm in trouble now.
Yeah.
He is omnipresent in that community, and that matters immensely, obviously. So I think that it's hard to believe Frank Caputo's in any trouble in this riding.
Now this would have been the election for Terry Lake to run as Liberal in.
Yes, for sure.
He picked the wrong election.
He did. He did.
But if Terry had run as Liberal, I think Terry could have done some serious damage.
I agree.
Or if they managed to recruit Todd Stone,
who's a conservative. Todd Stone's a conservative.
Is he? What is he?
Todd
We don't
Stone's
really know.
name.
But he's just enjoying his political retirement in Kamloops, so I think he wisely stayed out of it. Caribou Prince George. Conservative Todd Doherty has held the seat since 2015. The Liberals almost pulled off an upset in 2015 in Prince George. They lost by about 5 points. The Liberals are running immigration consultant Clinton Emsley. Now, a bit of a controversy up there with the Liberals. Chris Beach, who I know, he's a former mayor of Burns Lake. He's a very high-profile media commentator in Prince George. He's a professor at a local college. He thought he had the nod, had gone through the process, and had announced his candidacy. And Liberals said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! You have not been greenlit yet." In the meantime, another week passed, and Clinton Emsley becomes the candidate, and Chris Beach is left at the train station watching the train leave. So he's been speaking out locally about his experience and not too happy about it. Um, so that cost at least a week in the Liberals campaigning up there. Probably has extracted a price from it,
Sure.
and it's just you know post campaign, we'll have a conversation on the pod about the green light process and how it works in all these parties because there's been a lot of these controversies in BC. The NDP are running Angie Bonazzo, who works in healthcare, HEU member. Um, Sheldon Clare, the local MLA for the BC Conservatives, once ran as an independent in this riding, got 1% of the vote. So it just goes to show you that keep an eye on these independent candidates. They might actually show up in office someday. But this looks like a Todd Doherty hold,
Yeah. Yeah.
unless, again, and we're talking like seat number 30 in BC or more if the Liberals
More.
win. I don't think they're going
Yeah.
to make it that high.
No.
But Doherty's been around and he seems to be a well-respected MP up there.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not even really worth looking back into the 90s when the New Democrats had some success in parts of this riding provincially. This is a
Yeah.
conservative riding. Prince George is a conservative town, and with the pressure points they are feeling, the one thing could be, do Prince George voters all of a sudden say, we believe the Liberals are the ones who can best fight back against Trump and forestry duties? That's a bit of a stretch for me. I think that's obviously Clinton Emsley needs to make that argument, but I think Todd Doherty's probably pretty safe.
Yeah. Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies. This is part of Prince George, all the way up to the Yukon border, down to Valemount as well. Um, this is the safest conservative seat in the province.
Yeah,
Bob Zimmer's held it since 2011, but this is conservative territory.
and it's the only one in the province where the Liberals finished fourth or worse. The PPC were better than the
Yeah,
Liberals last time around based on these
right.
maps. And so, yeah, this is a super safe Bob Zimmer seat, and the Conservatives will hold on to this one easily. If you take these maps and apply it to last election, they win this at almost 60%, and the NDP is at 14 in second. So this is going to be a wipeout here
Right.
for the Conservatives.
The NDP are running Corey Grizz Longley,
Yeah, it was run
and
lots of times before
he
provincially, and
he
yeah.
he looks like Grizzly Adams, so that's just wanted to notice that. Um, just I know we already covered it, but I'm just gonna do a little quick check in on Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Yeah, yeah,
I haven't heard a lot about it. Polyev went up there to campaign.
yeah,
Um, I don't know how Taylor Backrack holds this seat, given where the NDP are at
yeah.
federally, and it would seem that Ellis Ross is going to be the beneficiary of that.
And New Democrats in Victoria are rooting very hard for Taylor to win, obviously. He is well
Yeah.
respected and liked, but there's a little piece of them who's hoping they lose, and he will be the next provincial NDP candidate for the Stikine riding that Nathan Cullen lost.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so if this doesn't go well for Taylor Backrat, he is one of the most well-liked guy in politics in this province, and I would expect we'll see him here in Victoria in 3 years' time if he still wants to stay involved in politics. He was the mayor of Smithers. He's been the MP. It's in his blood. But New Democrats are hoping he holds on against Ellis Ross. But I think the things are aligning in a way that Ellis Ross and the Conservatives are going to make this a blue-orange flip. It will probably be one of the easiest ones for them to flip. The combination of conservative wave in that region plus Ellis is as good a candidate as the Conservatives can get
Okay.
there. So that's all I'm hearing about this riding is that there's this buzz in Victoria about, and what if Taylor's a political free agent? He'd be a pretty great guy to run in Stikine, and sort of be the next phase of what we saw with Nathan Cullen.
Right. Okay. North of 60. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by those who moil for votes. With apologies to Robert Service. Um, I've had a lot of chats or feedback from people in the Yukon in the past week about what's going on up there. some hot takes, some cold takes that are colder than Sam McGee on Christmas Day. But what it shakes out to is that Brendan Hanley, former chief medical officer in the Yukon, is seeking his second term as Liberal MP. It was kind of like Bonnie Henry running for the Liberals last election up in the Yukon because he was like fresh off the COVID
COVID.
crisis in onto the ballot. Now he's being challenged by former Conservative MP Ryan Leaf. Now Ryan Leaf's a bit of a character. He served one term, and then when he was running for re-election, his signs were being defaced, so he dressed up in camo with a buddy, and they caught a person, did a citizen's arrest, handcuffed her, and turned her into the police. I don't think the controversy really worked out for him
All right.
in terms of how the local coverage played out. He did say this election that his days, quote unquote, my days of jumping out of the bushes are long over. So that should reassure those who engage in sign vandalism in the Yukon that they are safe from Ryan Leaf. But I do want to have a shout out to the history of this riding.
Yeah.
This is has a glorious political history. Eric Nielsen, who was the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada for a time, he served it for 30 years. His brother is a Hollywood movie star, Leslie Nielsen, but Eric Nielsen was known as Velcro Lips, and because he was very tight-lipped with the media, in the national media. But when he, the airport's named after him, he's a big deal in the Yukon. When he resigned his seat and caused a by-election, Audrey McLaughlin took the seat over, and she became the national leader of the NDP. And didn't have a great result in the 93 election, but very well respected. And then over the years, the seat has gone liberal. Larry Bagnall had it for a long time. He lost it to Ryan Leaf. He gained it back from Ryan Leaf. And finally, in the last cycle, last couple of cycles, it's when Ryan Leaf didn't run last time, the Conservatives had a bit of a controversy where the candidate who wanted to run, Jonas Smith, didn't get, wasn't allowed to run because of his views on a few issues. He ran as an independent. He split the vote and allowed the Liberals to win. So there's a lot of moving parts in the Yukon. It's a really interesting microcosm. But this time, it looks tough. It looks tough for the Conservatives to win it back, given the Liberal surge, given that the incumbent Brendan Hanley, he was an early objector to Justin Trudeau. He was one of the first MPs to call for him to leave, and he was also one of the MPs standing up for Mark Carney at his leadership launch. So he kind of got ahead of the curve on that issue.
Yeah, and you guys know Mike is well prepared. When he told me we're doing the Yukon, he also sent me a two-sheeter with all the details about the history of this. So you're in good hands here with Mike breaking down Yukon. The history is fascinating, as you said. I think based on the trend lines, you have to believe this is going to be a Liberal seat. It is, it's focused on Whitehorse largely. Getting to the rest of the riding is challenging, but there's not a lot of votes here. Like Hanley won this last time with fewer than 6,500 votes. So there's an expectation in communities like this that you meet the candidates, you know the candidates. It is a ground game, best you can oriented campaign because getting to parts of the riding is hard, but there's an expectation at least that you see or hear from the candidate directly. And incumbency, yes, we've seen some movement as you described, but incumbency seems with the current trend lines seems to be an advantage.
Well, it is one of those seats I would have said 6 months ago this was a lock for the
Oh,
Conservatives.
for sure. I would think so
And
too.
especially there was a Conservative candidate who had announced, Ted Laking, who's was a city councilor in Whitehorse, very popular, and then he backed out, and a lot of speculation as to why that was. He's now running territorially, but I think it's another case of maybe the national office over managing the nomination process. Should have left the locals to deal with it, who know it better. And if Laking was running against the Liberals, then I'd probably be saying right now it's a real horse race and it could go down to the wire. But right now it does look like a liberal win. But you never know. We might be eating our words on election night. Okay, that was a lot of geography to cover today. Making me pretty thirsty. We should head off to the Mimosa Bar. Okay, Richard, what do you got? Orange juice or
I
grapefruit?
think I think I'm going to go orange this week, and I think it's for all the national leaders who spent time in British Columbia this week. We saw on Monday. uh, I'm sure it's happened before, but it was the first time that I could really lock in that all three major party leaders, plus Green leader Elizabeth May, were all in British Columbia at the same time. And they were all in different places. But I always like to see leaders pay attention to our great province here, Mike. It shows that these ridings matter. Like you described, Pierre Polyev spent some time up in Ellis Ross's riding. Interesting. One they want to flip. We saw some time being spent as well for the NDP trying to hold on to their seats in Metro Vancouver. And we saw Mark Carney in Victoria. Again, a place where they want to pick up.
Has
So my
Paulie been in Metro Vancouver enough though, like in the suburbs? Like, I don't sense that he's really
No,
made
and
his
I
mark.
expect we're going to get a multi-day
Yeah,
Richmond rally. Another, they've done their big Surrey rally, so that they go there again. They need to pick up Richmonds. They need to pick up Tri-Cities. They
yeah.
need to be engaged in the core and Burnaby and Vancouver, although that's hard for them. So I expect we're going to get a big Pierre Polyev blitz through Metro in the lead up into the advanced polls and out of the advanced polls right after the debate. It is going to be a big BC swing where he's going to do these big Metro Vancouver events to try to put a mark on that. But yeah, I'd say my orange mimosa goes to the tour operators, those that are running tour for the big parties. Thank you for visiting our beautiful province. You can leave now, though. We have too many people that live here. So, and universally, Mike, the journalists I've spoken to that have been here on tour, some of them, this is their first trip to BC. They say to me, "Oh, you sure have a beautiful province here." And I said, "Shh, don't tell anybody."
Go home. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to do grapefruit mimosa to I guess both the conservative and the NDP campaigns. You got to get out the smelling salts here. It's the 13th of April. There's 15 days left. Now, well, for the conservatives, they're actually running ahead of the pace compared to last election. But I see that their ads are starting to pivot now, talking more about liberal fourth term and trying to attach Carney to the baggage of the government. But
Yeah.
I think they have overall been slow to respond to what's been happening with the Carney effect and the Trump tariffs. So this is moving week at the Masters. This is the crunch time. It's going to be too late a week from now unless the trend is reversed. So they've got to get out the smelling salts at conservative headquarters, and NDP, boy, double smelling salts.
Yeah.
They're in
Desperation mode.
yeah, their ads are changing too, but they are really struggling to come up with a compelling ballot question to get, you know, a salvage mission to save some of these seats. So
Yeah.
again, this is the week that they have to. We got the debates coming up this week. Some people say the debates don't matter. I think this time, if there is a significant vulnerability that emerges from Carney at the debate, he stumbles badly, then that might be the ignition that the opposition parties need. But so far, it's been tough to, tough to find a weakness in the Liberal campaign.
Just last point, I find this pivot that Pierre Poilievre has made to Stephen Harper really interesting. I think that's their pivot. Look, remember 2007, 2008, we managed through a financial crisis. Stephen Harper was the one at the helm. Remember how great life was back then? I don't know if that's a selling feature. And the other thing you have to remember, the governor of the Bank of Canada hired in 2008, Mike. Oh, what's his name? Oh, yeah, Mark Carney. So it's going to be a weird, compelling argument, but you're
Yeah.
seeing that. I'm watching all of Poilievre's for my daily job, and there's more mentions of Stephen Harper now than I've ever heard. And I don't know if that's the pivot they need to try to create some credibility around the economy and at the same time try to discredit Mark Carney.
Right. Well, thank you, Richard, and thank you to all our guests for joining us today for episode 3 of Hotel Pacifico's Battle for BC, and to our sponsors, the National Police Federation and BC Dairy. See you next time. BC, you can never leave.